folks, today I just want to talk about the Solera Vat system that I'm trying to do with my whiskey aging. What we have in front of us, if you can imagine, all these jars are the same as these 2 litre ones at the back here. Effectively they'll all be the same size in the final version. It's only these 4 that I currently have at that size. But so what we have is 5 jars that will have somewhere between new make and 1-year-old whiskey in them. Each jar is topped up in turn with each batch of whiskey that I make, roughly on a 10-week schedule. So after 50 weeks I'll be starting to fill the first one up again. So half of this jar will get taken out and be replaced with new make from the latest distillation. That half a jar will either go into a bottle as a 1-year-old whiskey, or it will get moved forward into one of these 2 jars, which is my 2-year-old whiskey jars. So in the first batch, I'll take a bottle. The second batch will move forward and half of the 2-year-old will become a bottle of 2-year-old whiskey. Then in the third batch I'll take another 1-year-old bottle. The fourth batch, that'll move forward and half of this will go forward, and instead of going into a bottle this time, it will move forward into the 3-year-old batch, and half of this 3-year-old will get bottled. In the 5th one I'll be taking another 1-year-old, and then in the 6th batch half of that will move forward, and again, so bottle, half forward, and all these, and the same with these. And these ones are only updated every 2 batches, but there'll be a bottle or moving forward for either these, and the 3rd year will come out. What that effectively means is that every 10 weeks I'll be getting a bottle, and that bottle will either be a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, or a 3-year-old whiskey, depending on where we are in the sequence. Because I'm only taking half of the liquid out of each jar, when I replace half of this jar with brand new new make, I'll then have 50% 1-year-old and 50% new make. By the time it's gone through the sequence, this will be 50% 2-year-old and 50% 1-year-old. And when I then replace it, I'll have 50% new make, 25% 1-year-old, 25% 2-year-old. And then again, as each year comes round and it gets refreshed again, it will get smaller and smaller proportions of older and older whiskey in each of these jars. And that will move forward as well. These jars will have at least a year old in there. So at least half of this jar will be 2 years old, and as it goes on it will be similarly, you know, a bit 3-year-old, bit 4-year-old, etc. And the same with the 3-year-old one. That'll have at least half of it as 3-year-old and half of it, if it's just been topped up, half of it of 2-year-old. And effectively this sequence of doing a batch of whiskey every 10 weeks means that I get about 5 bottles of whiskey a year. That's more than enough for my sipping. I'll probably still be buying the odd bottle of actual production whiskey, the ones that I like. But eventually this is where I see it go forward. Now maybe 1-year-old doesn't age enough, and 2-year-old and 3-year-old, and therefore I may stretch out the batches and maybe do a batch every 15 weeks or 20 weeks, and in which case the ages of these will be progressively older. For instance, if I went for a 10 to 20 week batch, we'd end up with 100 weeks in here, almost 2 years before we move forward, and these ones would be almost 4 years old, and this one would be almost 6 years old as we go through. And we'll juggle those timings to as we're testing what flavours I get out of these jars and see whether I actually want to age them longer or whether I'm happy with them as they are. One of the big unknowns that I don't know what I'm going to do about this is the first batch of whiskey that I put on oak. I put 4 of the Jack Daniel's cubes into a small jar like this. It oaked up pretty quickly and became too oaky for what I enjoyed. So I divided the product down, put more whiskey in the jar with less oak. I currently have only 2 cubes in each of these large jars. I'm hoping that'll be enough. Obviously over time I'll need to work out a sequence of refreshing the wood, maybe replacing a whole cube out of 2, you know, replacing 50% of the wood in the new jars once a year is okay. If not, then I may end up dividing the cubes up into smaller pieces so that I can take only a quarter of the wood out at the end of the year and then put another little quarter of the amount of wood in. So I end up with a cycle of new wood coming into the Solera as well as the new make whiskey. And similarly I'll move the wood forward through the jars such that the oldest wood is in the oldest whiskey, so that hopefully that will prevent it from getting really over oaked. But we'll see. It'll be a case of monitoring as it goes along and seeing where we are with this. In amongst doing all the batches specifically for the Solera Vat, I'll be doing other batches of whiskey, for instance like the partially peated one that I did. That's sitting in a separate jar. It won't get mixed in with these ones. I may find that when I come to actually bottle the whiskies, I'll consider blending in a bit of the other experiments that I do. Like peated one, I intend to try a few bourbons and things like that. Well, that's just a quick run through of what I intend to do with my Solera Vat system. So thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy my content, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.